it is in the avenue of engaging our culture, but I want to deal with engaging some of the other aspects of our culture that we often struggle with. And I think one of the areas that we could always use a pep talk or an encouragement or maybe a brief discussion about is, how do we talk to our neighbors about God in a skeptical world? We do live in a skeptical world. We live in a very changing culture. At least in the United States, we're often being told, and I really, while I could see the trend, I don't feel that I have to despair so much, but we are developing, and have been for some time, this post-Christian thinking about our country. I don't know if that's PR and hoping the society will keep thinking that, or if in fact this is where we're headed. But at any rate, I do feel that there are more people willing to come out as unbelievers. More people might feel they're atheists or skeptics or deists, or they'll just claim they don't believe in God, but perhaps not know why they don't believe in God. And we have to figure out how to talk to our neighbors. So what I want to do tonight is walk us through just a couple of talking points that I think will be helpful for us. And all of these could be further discussed in lengthier discussions and sermons and Bible studies, but here is just a few high notes of how we can talk to our neighbors about God. The first thing I want to say is, when we open up the Bible in Genesis chapter 1, we are immediately introduced to God. There's no real apologetic of, proving that God exists. The Bible assumes the existence of God. Listen to this. In the beginning of what? Time, the universe, human history. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So God created the universe, and then out of what He created, He begins to organize the material that He had created, and we see this unfold in the 6 days of creation of Genesis 1. And as we realize, our Bible, it does not shy away from affirming the existence of God. We have to realize we live in a time where it is something that we have to affirm in our society. It is not always convenient. It may happen at work. It may happen at the lunch break. It may happen at home. It may happen between spouses. It may happen in a lot of different settings that are not always comfortable, but still, we must do so. And some of the issues that come up from our society, from our culture, is this secular worldview, and that often is relativistic. In other words, there is no objective truth. There is no objective truths at all, which is interesting because that statement that there is no absolute truth is what? An absolute statement, right? So they deny something that they are doing themselves to prove there's no absolute truth. Nevertheless, that could be a discussion at some point, but the only exceptions, it seems, that there is in this world of relativism is that the claim can be made that there's no absolute truths, that there is no objective morality for that sake. Everything is relative based on different cultures and different societies. And even we know for sure that God does not exist because of our rationalistic, natural point of view. And because of that, science is going to be our key to knowing truth, reality, etc. So these seem to be sort of some of the core things that our society really believes in, and can feel intimidating. But I want to encourage you that we don't need to feel intimidated by relativism. We don't need to be intimidated by science. I believe in science. Science is good. It helps us. We should invest in true science. But politicized science is no friend of science. And I think that's usually where the troubles emerge. But we don't need to be intimidated. They may sound tough, like tough issues to tackle. And I'm not saying they are easy to quickly solve in a moment. They're not like some sort of puzzle box. We should take time and develop our minds to think through these. Too many times we believers tend to hide and run like ostriches, hoping that the debate will just simply pass. Or some other person, some great thinker will emerge out of thin air. But no, we have to step into the trenches at different times. And I'm not asking of us to think today that you're going to be, a philosopher. Maybe you are prone to philosophy. Maybe you're prone to deep thinking. Maybe your interests lay otherwise. But you may still be able to contribute to talk about God with people you care about. See, because despite being intimidated, we need good thinkers. We need to be good thinkers. Remember what the words from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5 says, verse 4 and 5, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind. With your mind. We are supposed to embrace God with our heart, definitely, the seat of our emotions, the seat of our thinking and choice making. But we also need to be willing to love God with our mind. And it's past time for some of us to do that. So here's a couple things. What are we going to talk about tonight? Nature's God. That's sort of a catchphrase. It's an old phrase that people use. In fact, it's a phrase used in the Declaration of Independence. They appeal to nature's God for their moral right to set upon their new government. But it's a easy way, and plus it fits in the frame. So nature's God, right? But what I want to share with you is a couple arguments here. The first thing I want to show you is from Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1, verses 19 to 20, which was just read by AC, shows us a few things that Paul is making an argument about, that people are without excuse, whoever they are, that know about God and do not revere Him. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you were born a Jew or if you were born a Gentile. If you do not acknowledge the God that is evidenced in the world around us, you are without excuse. You have no defense. He will make the argument that we will often choose our pleasures. We will often choose immoral things, and will often switch for those things rather than serve God. At any rate, what we're saying here, and what Paul is ultimately saying, is that we believe that there is someone beyond what we see in nature. God is not the same thing as nature. He's outside of nature, but we can know about that person, that being, because of the nature, because of nature around us. It points beyond what we see. It points to things beyond, to the things that we cannot see, the invisible God. The world is all the evidence we need to talk about God. You can look at plants, you can look at your animals, your pets, you can look at your body, you can look at all sorts of things. All you need is the world that you see to be able to point to God. It's that simple. It's that near to us. We don't have to go to school to point to a tree or an animal or a heart or an eyeball. We can point to design. We can point to impressive intelligence surrounding the world around us. And we say that that points to this person who created it, God. We might say, well, that's all great, but what happens when they want more evidence than just look at the world around you? I understand. Now, like I said, these are all large topic issues, but I wanted to reduce a few of these and share with you. The first one I want to share with you is just an argument of cause and effect. Simple cause and effect. We see it every day. We do it every day. In fact, they've shown that children, infants, by 5 months, use cause and effect. When they're hungry, they cry. And they do it on purpose. Because they have learned by 5 months, if I cry, I get food. If I cry, I get picked up. If I cry, I will get hugged, something will happen. I could trigger behavior if I cry. So cause and effect is something we do every day. And it's an oddity in some philosophical world views that people try to disconnect any cause to any effect. And yes, it's true that just because something has been done, and we don't always have to correlate everything together. But listen to this. Hebrews chapter 3 verse 4 and Hebrews 11 verse 3. In the middle of different arguments, there are different principles that the writer to the Hebrews argues. He says in Hebrews 3:4, for every house is built by someone. Is that not true? Every house is built by someone. You don't need the Bible to teach you that, but it's in there. But the builder of all things is God. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by the Word of God. So that what is seen, the universe, the nature, the things that are seen were not made out of things that are visible. In other words, God created out of nothing. The things that you see, the things that you touch, the thing that you are, the person that you are, the material person that you are. God created that. Arguing for the existence of God is as simple as seeing connection, cause and effect. Now, I do want to point out a couple interesting things here that might help us sharpen this thought a little bit better. And I'm probably only going to do this with this particular topic. The three things that are connected, and this was presented by one of my professors, Dr. Ralph Gilmore, and he made an argument that there are three things that are connected to the issue of cause and effect. One, you have the issue of causality. What is the principle of cause and effect? Something must happen that affects something else. Pretty simple. I have a slide for this. But we also know that there's something to understand about necessity. Something must necessarily exist to make something happen. Third point is there are contingent things. Not everything is necessary, and so some things are brought about because of the effects of other people or other things. Like regarding causality, we would make the argument that God caused the world to exist. The world was caused by God. And usually you have to look at it from the vantage point of the thing that you see. You go from the thing made or the thing caused to talk about who made it. For example, a painting is made by a painter. A painter does not necessarily have to create a painting. Just because he's a painter or she's a painter doesn't mean they've actually done some artwork, at least in a certain moment in time. You have to go from the thing made, point back to the person who made it. A poem is made by a poet. A painting is made by a painter. Okay? A cake is made by a baker. And so we work from that point of view back. We look at the world and say, this points back to someone greater, God. Necessity. We basically make the argument that God exists and cannot not exist. It sounds like a ridiculous sentence, but pause and think about. We're talking about what is something that creates a universe, something that is not caused. And I really want to just make a simple point about this without getting into a lot of the nuances here. Is that what we're saying here is God created a contingent place, a contingent world. It's dependent on God, but God is not dependent on anything. He is a necessary being. He exists and cannot not exist. Or we might say it this way, the sentence God is only works for God. God always exists. He is and will always be. I almost said is, but that wouldn't be a proper sentence. And finally, at least for this point, we are all iffy creations. We are all iffy beings. This is a term Dr. Ralph Gilmore would use to talk about contingency. We exist if this happens. I only exist because my mom and dad got married. That's why I'm here. I'm an iffy person. Now, I'm not iffy morally. Well, I might be, but, Jesus is helping me on that. But we are all iffy in terms of existence. We're not necessary beings. We're not just supposed to be here. We're here because of other things that have happened. So when we talk about contingency, and we talk about cause and effect, we're talking about these three important principles. And one of the strongest arguments that I've come across is called the Calem argument for the existence of the universe that points back to God. It's very simple. You can memorize it in this lesson if you'd like. Listen to this. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. It is a very simple argument. And in fact, we can look at each one of these, and plenty of books have been written on this particular subject. But listen to this. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. That's pretty self-explanatory. How did something begin? Because it was made. Now, we seem to apply it to everything else except the universe. And we've come up, scientific communities have come up with different theories to explain that the universe could exist forever, sort of expanding and contracting and expanding and contracting forever. But the strongest laws of science go against that. We know that the universe had a beginning. Scientifically speaking, whether you agree with the Big Bang or not, the major view of the beginning or the origin of the universe is the Big Bang. In other words, everything winds back to this one moment that all of a sudden you have nothing and then boom, an explosion of everything around us. That's the major view of the origin of the universe. The universe began, but we also know it maintains to exist. It continues to exist. But that's another argument altogether. The universe began to exist, and if that rule follows, that if things begin to exist, applies to everything, including the universe, then it had to be caused. The real question at the end of that argument is, who or what caused it? Did it cause itself, or did someone else cause it? And our argument has been, and the evidence better points to, God. So the first argument is cause and effect. We see it every day. We see it all the time. We can point to the reason why I have a bruise is because someone hit me. The reason why I have a dent in my car is because someone hit me. If the sandwich is gone, it's because I ate it. Like, we have lots of different causes and effects. We see it all the time. Babies use it. We use it. God uses it. We see nature not using it, but being an evidence of it. I want to point to another thing. Intelligence. Yes, we often make fun of the idea that aliens are looking for intelligent life, and so they come and they leave. But intelligence, we are surrounded by intelligence. Not just the ability of our minds to constantly be working behind the basic known thinking processes. We have a powerful mind, we do. But I'm talking about that we live in a intelligent design, heavy world. But just to give you some biblical perspective, in Psalm 139, verses 14 to 16, we read this. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, as yet there was none of them. When as yet there was none of them. This passage inspired a book by the very title, Fearfully and Wonderfully Made. I encourage you to pick it up and read it. And it talks about, it's written by an MD and a theologian, and it talks about the amazing process of going from life of conception to the birthing process. It is a miracle within itself, all the different things that have to occur within the woman's body to bring about a new life into the world. And it has to work the first time, otherwise there would be no other human beings. It's just amazing. We see not just muscles and bones and things at work, but we see them structured in such an intelligent way and prepared in such an intelligent, laden way that they work exactly the way they're supposed to. And when they don't, we acknowledge that something has gone wrong. We acknowledge when things have not performed according to their intelligent, laden capacity. That's why there are C-sections. That's why there's all sorts of other things that happen that we go, these are not how it's supposed to be. These are things that we have to prepare for at different times. But what can we say about intelligence in the world around us? As I said, we live in an information-laden world. And that in itself, in this complex world, we see this level of complex design. And that complex design that just exists in the things around us point to an intelligent designer outside of the intelligent things we see around us. A painting doesn't exist without a painter. And a design does not exist without a designer. Intelligence organized to coincide with power, force, energy, proper movement, and within its movement, a purpose, does not happen without someone to put those things together. I remember doing fourth grade science with Jacob, and I remember we had an opportunity to look at the human body as one of the. It was like one of the appendix. It wasn't like a full section, but I was really impressed at how many units, how many systems there are in the human body that have to work together. And this is not going to be a medical class or anything like that, so don't worry. It is beyond my expertise, but I am able to understand that all of these systems have to work together for a human being to properly function. They need bones, you need muscles, you need tendons, you need nerves, you need blood to rush oxygen to all of these areas so they can move and that they don't atrophy. You need a system to bring in oxygen from the world. You need a system to take out things that are poisonous that you are creating, and you have these methods to remove waste from your body. Like, you are a perfect system when everything is going well, perfectly designed. You are a universe of powerful truth, that you are made by an intelligent designer. You don't have to go to school to say, look at my hand, look at how I have muscles and digits and how I can command my body to just move. These are simple arguments just to say God exists. Here's a caricature, a little cartoon. Here you see just a scientist trying to put together all these random things together. You have metal, and you have wheels, and you have energy, and all that. Just all these people just trying to slam all these things together, hoping to get a car out of it. That's really not how cars are made. That's really not how cars are made. And we know that. You can have all of the things that you need, all the metal, all the different things you need, but when you just put them all together and you shove a bunch of electricity at it, it doesn't do anything. You have to have intelligence. You need an intelligent designer to create a warehouse. You need an intelligent designer to create the factory style. And you need someone intelligent enough to organize the manpower to drill all these things together. You need what is essentially a working body organism. We just call it a business factory making cars. But it parallels the human body. We're not here by accident, brethren. We are here because someone made us. And the evidence of it is this beautiful baby and this pretty cool car. They do not happen by accident. And they are just an encyclopedia of all kinds of proof of intelligence being purely imported and given to us. It just exists within us. We can also talk about right and wrong. This is one of my favorite topics. This is one of the areas that I've been trying to spend more time and wrestling through and dealing with. How do you know when something's right? How do you know when something's wrong? Well, on the one hand, we know societies in general have always had rules, have always had some kind of standard, some sort of code of conduct. And Paul even appeals to this. In Romans chapter 2, verses 12 to 16, we read, "For all who have sinned without the law will also perish without the law, and all who have sinned under the law will be judged by the law. For it is not the hearers of the law who are righteous before God, but the doers of the law who will be justified." He goes on to say, "For when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the work of the law is written on their hearts, and while their conscience also bears witness." And finally, "And their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them on that day when, according to my gospel, God judges the secrets of men by Jesus, or by Christ Jesus." There are a lot of things that we can talk about. We can look at the argument Paul is using and why he's making this argument. But what I want to make very clear is one of the issues Paul raises here is Jews and Gentiles understand morality. Just because you didn't grow up in Israel didn't mean you never knew what was right, what was wrong. You knew. You could be a morally good person, put that in quotes, but you still were accountable for the wrongs you did. And you're still going to be held accountable for the wrongs that you did. How does that happen? How do we have an understanding of right and wrong? C.S. Lewis, in his classic book, Mere Christianity, if you've never read it, I want to encourage you to read it. He begins a section about morality. He goes, it's a funny business when you can see people arguing over things. They say things like, you should have done this, you shouldn't have done that, you promised this, you promised that, you didn't do this. And all of a sudden he goes, in the midst of our just everyday communication of disagreements and rights and wrongs, we presume there is some sort of standard that we can always put someone under and say, look at this thing you said you were going to do. You didn't do it. You violated this standard. It doesn't matter if you're arguing over who stole whose pencil. It doesn't matter if you're talking about who made what sandwich and ate it. It doesn't matter. The principle is everybody understands when we talk to each other about rights and wrongs, there is a standard that we all put each other under. Whether it's etiquette, whether it's an actual right or wrong, whatever it is. He goes on to say, though, he goes, I know that some people say the idea of the law of nature or decent behavior known to all men is unsound because different civilizations in different ages have had quite different moralities. Have you heard something like that before? This is where people say morality is relative. But this is not true. There have been differences between their moralities, but these have never amounted to anything like a total difference. In other words, there's a scale. There's different things we might disagree on that we might punish, or we might say that's a truly wrong thing, but we haven't disagreed fundamentally. You don't kill people. You don't steal from each other. There are things that we know about decent behavior. Where does this understanding come from? Paul says God put it there. Well, if God designed our bodies to be so complex and so amazingly designed, it doesn't surprise me that he also placed within us the ability to understand. Before being informed, before having a decision, we know certain things should be done. We know certain things should not be done. And the fact that we can say, you ought to have done this, like that's something you should do, implies that there is a standard that we're all amendable to. Our human behavior betrays us that there is a moral standard. For example, well, let me finish reading this quote, and I want to add something here that's not in my slide. If anyone will take the trouble to compare the moral teachings of, say, the ancient Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Hindus, the Chinese, the Greeks, and the Romans, what will really strike him will be how very like they are to each other and to our own. Yes, there are going to be differences, different assumptions and things like that. But by and large, the human race has not been very different morally. Where does that come from? Where does this shared sense of morality, right and wrong, come from? This is an over-the-table discussion. And the moment we say that morality is relative, you have just literally undone every possible way to ever bring in anyone into account for any crime they've ever done. Like, you may still have a system, but your system is based on nothing. It's based on sinking sand. If you say there's no such thing as right and wrong, it's just a sort of a shared kind of cultural pool, then guess what? Just wait 20 years and that'll change. A wrong will become right, and a right can become wrong. The foundation of our legal system will be completely eroded if there's no standard of right and wrong. It may still exist, but it will have no basis and eventually become a self-defeating system. We don't live in a world like that. Even people who don't believe in a moral standard still like to function in a world where they can count on moral standards. Where does that desire come from? I'll put it to you like this. Is it right to protect women's rights from abuse? I would hope we would like to say yes. It is right to protect women from physical abuse or sex trafficking or whatever it is around the world. Yes, women's rights is important. Men's rights are important, but just hear me out. Okay, if that is right to protect them and work for their protection, why is it right? Why is it right? How can you make an argument that something ought to be done when you have no basis for objective moral truth? You can't. But we like to operate on that premise. We need it to function in society, to have a healthy society. And so my argument is simply this as we close. Many times, the simplest things around us make a powerful argument for the existence of God. We're here. Where did we come from? It's the age-old human question. Where did we come from? What's our purpose here? Why are we here? Ultimately, if we're here because of a random quantum fluctuation in a spaceless, timeless void, if we're here because of just a big accident go boom, then there's no purpose. And eventually we'll just spin out, because that's what things do when they have no purpose. But that's not what we have. We're here because we were caused by a great causer, the first cause, the uncaused first cause. We're also here and able to see design around us. Your hands, your eyes, the things like the camera, the things that we're using right now to record this, based off the design, early models designed of the eye. We know that a camera has a design, but we can't say an eyeball has a design. That's is the basis for our cameras. Surely there's a level of hypocrisy there. But we have things so easily available to us. Our moral code. Where does it come from? We're not required to say that everyone agrees on everything exactly the same way. The point is we all agree that there are standards of right and wrong. And so society needs that to function appropriately. And I think that points again to the one who made us